Verdun. Just one name, but it became a nightmare that lasted nearly a year. Imagine an entire battlefield so drenched in fire and blood that soldiers called it the meat grinder. The longest battle of World War I, lasting a staggering 302 days, turned a French fortress city into hell on earth. But here's what most people don't know. Verdun wasn't just about military strategy. It was a battle of national survival, of psychological warfare, and of unimaginable suffering. So, what really happened at Verdun? And why did both sides refuse to back down, even when the cost was nearly 1 million lives? Let's dig into the brutal truth. When people think of World War I, trench warfare, mud, and barbed wire come to mind. But Verdun was different. It was personal. The Germans had a plan: bleed France white. Instead of just winning ground, they aimed to destroy the French army itself, by forcing them to defend a symbol they could never surrender: the ancient fortress of Verdun. What followed was nearly a year of relentless shelling gas attacks, hand-to-hand combat, and a psychological war that pushed soldiers beyond human limits. Verdun was more than a battle. It was a national trauma, a test of endurance, and a massacre that redefined the horrors of modern warfare. So let's break it all down. Why did Germany choose Verdun? What were their real goals? How did the French manage to hold on? And what was the true cost of the longest battle of World War I? By early 1916, World War I was at a deadlock. The Western Front had become a maze of trenches stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. Millions were already dead, and neither side had gained much ground. Germany, under General Erich von Falkenhayn, was looking for a way to force a decisive victory, or at least cripple France so severely that they would sue for peace. Enter Verdun. It wasn't the most strategically vital location, but it was a symbol of French pride, an ancient fortress city that had resisted invaders for centuries. Falkenhayn believed that if he attacked Verdun, the French would throw everything they had into its defense, bleeding their army dry in the process. The problem? The French didn't just bleed, they fought back with everything they had. Falkenhayn's plan was brutal in its simplicity. He didn't aim to break through enemy lines. Instead, he wanted to force the French into a meat grinder. The idea was that Germany could afford to trade casualties at a slightly better rate than France. Over time, this would drain French manpower, morale, and resources to the point of collapse. To execute this plan, Germany assembled one of the largest artillery barrages in history. On February 21, 1916, over 1,200 German guns unleashed a firestorm that shook the earth. More than 1 million shells rained down on French positions, turning the landscape into a cratered wasteland. Entire forests vanished in seconds. Villages disappeared, and the sky was filled with fire and smoke so thick it turned day into night. But here's what Falkenhayn underestimated. The French, under General Philippe Pétain, refused to break. Pétain quickly became a national hero. He reorganized French defenses, introduced the Noria system, a rotation strategy to keep troops fresh, and made sure reinforcements kept flowing. The infamous Voie Sacrée, the Sacred Way, became a lifeline, with supply trucks pouring into Verdun 24/7, keeping the fight alive. The battle turned into a seesaw of horror. German troops captured Fort Douaumont, but they couldn't break the French. In June they seized Fort Vaux, only to find themselves trapped in a death trap of close-quarters combat. Soldiers fought with bayonets, grenades, and even their bare hands in dark, flooded tunnels where corpses outnumbered the living. Conditions were beyond nightmarish. Rain turned the battlefield into a swamp of rotting flesh. Gas attacks filled the trenches with choking clouds of poison. Supplies ran out, and soldiers resorted to drinking contaminated water from shell craters. Sleep was impossible. Death came from above, below, and all around. By the summer of 1916, Verdun had become exactly what Falkenhayn had envisioned, a bloodbath. But there was one problem. Germany was bleeding too. As the months dragged on, the Germans realized their mistake. Verdun wasn't breaking France, it was draining Germany too. Meanwhile, the British launched the Somme offensive in July, forcing Germany to divert troops away from Verdun. Slowly but surely, the French began pushing back. Petain's strategy of constant reinforcement paid off. Fresh troops rotated in, supplies kept arriving, and morale remained just high enough to sustain the fight. The French launched counterattacks that chipped away at German positions, reclaiming lost ground inch by inch. By October they retook Fort Douaumont. In December they reclaimed Fort Vaux. The German offensive had officially failed. By the end of the year, the front lines were almost back where they had started in February. But the cost unimaginable. Verdun became the ultimate symbol of endurance. Over 700,000 men were killed, wounded, or went missing. The landscape was so devastated that even today, parts of Verdun remain uninhabitable due to unexploded ordnance. The psychological toll on survivors was immense. Many suffered from shell shock, the early term for PTSD. Falkenhayn was dismissed. Pétain, on the other hand, became a legend. His words, "They shall not pass," became an anthem of French resistance. So what really happened at Verdun? It wasn't just the longest battle of World War I, it was one of the most horrifying. A battle fought not for land, but for pride, for survival, and for a desperate attempt to break an enemy's spirit. In the end, Verdun changed the course of the war. It weakened Germany, strengthened French unity, and foreshadowed the brutality of World War II's battles decades later. But the real question is, was it worth it? Subscribe for more history that reveals the brutal truths they don't teach in school.